I don't hopefully equip our colleagues to feel a little more comfortable helping address some of the concerns that you're seeing in the classroom this semester and beyond. So I'm Lara Vance. I'm the Dean of Students.
And I'm Starr Wentzel. I'm the Director of First Year Courses.
We also have one of our Master of Social Work interns with us today, Lexi Boley, who's here to learn with us all. And we're going to go through this with a smaller group. These things tend to go quickly, but we are covering a lot of material, so I'll get us rolling. We were going to ask, had we had, more people maybe to pop in the chat or something, but Brad's out and I don't know that we're going to see the chat. So feel free to unmute yourself if you want at any time. That's an easy thing to do with a smaller group. But we were going to ask what you've been seeing in your classrooms this semester, but we went ahead, we took a little guess from what we're seeing, what Starr's instructors are seeing in their classrooms in freshman seminar, and what I'm seeing in my office from referrals from faculty and staff. So attendance issues, which I think that's something that we've seen a lot, and lack of adherence to deadlines, and a fun new thing that I know freshman seminar instructors are seeing.
Students are coming to class, but they're not doing any of the work. And so we've seen that a whole lot recently, is that they're coming, but they're not doing the work in the class, but then they didn't have homework in high school. So they're not doing any of the homework at home, or they're just not submitting it, whether they're doing it in class or not.
Lots of social anxiety, including, we're seeing things like students they don't want to meet in person. They don't want to have in-person meetings. They don't want to go to class because then they have to interact with people. And when they are interacting socially, it's there are challenges with that. They're also having difficulty with conflict management in that they're not managing it at all. They're just running away from it, which also means that they're not going to their professors to say, hey, I don't understand this grade, or hey, I had a problem submitting this assignment, or really anything, communicating with professors because they're afraid of a conflict. Lots and lots of trauma dumping, dumpsters full of trauma dumping, where they'll come in and tell an instructor, here is my whole life story and everything that I've ever encountered that has caused my mental health issues. Increased stress and anxiety. It's anecdotal evidence at this point, but we're also seeing a lot of stress-induced seizures and reports on that. Just general lack of communication, so they'll ghost you. And just in general, struggles with executive functioning, time management, communication.
And I think one big thing with the lack of communication with fall or with midterm grades coming out, students are going to start communicating now. I had a student just this week that said, I got an FN in the class. What do I need to do to fix that? And so the professor responded back and was like, well, I haven't seen you since August 31st, and I've sent you multiple communications and you haven't responded to anything. So again, I think it goes back to that difficulty with conflict management because they've missed so many times and now they don't know exactly what to do, which has increased their stress and anxiety. But expect some forms of communication coming, and we'll talk a little bit more about like midterm recovery, especially for first year students. But I know a lot of people are now starting to get communications on how do I fix this now.
If there's anything that you've been seeing that we haven't mentioned that you feel was particularly important for the conversation, or you're hoping to get answers to, like I said, feel free to unmute and chime in.
Covered them.
Yeah. So we're here to talk a lot about resilience today, and that's going to we're going to take different paths with this. But we know that resilience is, critical in life. but our dilemma, I think, is that there's a balance that we have to find between reducing unnecessary stressors versus building emotional resilience. So what are the things in our classes and even elsewhere on campus that we can do that reduces stressors that just aren't necessary? Well, some stressors are necessary though. But if we're not addressing the stressors that our students are facing, we're not going to retain them. But we can't reduce all the stressors because then they're not going to be successful in college or beyond, because life is stressful. And we liked this quote, from a book that we use as a primary resource. So we'll show you the title of that book here in a minute. But you know, we don't want our students to define themselves by their circumstances, but we also can't pretend that they don't exist either. So we've heard a lot of these strategies before. This is how we help students build resilience. Talk about growth mindset, and that's Carol Dweck. Helping students learn from their mistakes and help them understand that improvement is a process. And we used to talk in the Success Center about the magical word yet. Like I'm not good at math yet. I've never been a good test taker yet. And so we would often correct the sentences students would use and say, how can you put yet in that statement so that you're showing more of a growth mindset? And it's not just a magical word. If we understand that it often means that it requires some work and effort to reset their mindset. Angela Duckworth and all of her research on grit recognizes that challenges are part of growth. And I can't tell you how many times I've said this to students. Learning takes effort. College is not easy. If college were easy, everybody would be doing it. It wouldn't be a big deal to get a college degree. This is hard, but hard work can be really good work. And, you know, just like lifting weights, you know, without effort, you're not going to grow. And then one of the terms that we use at EKU a whole lot is metacognition. It was even in our last QEP was the use of metacognitive strategies and helping students to reflect on their own thought processes and being aware of how they're learning, what they're doing. So I'm going to, throughout this, we're going to hit on some just possible applications of some of these strategies to maybe give you all some ideas of some things that maybe you haven't thought of before, or maybe you're using already and you're like, oh, I realized that I could more intentionally explain to students why I do this. And the first one's giving them a clear grading process. I talked to a student recently that I said, well, what's your average in the class? And he didn't know. And I said, well, you can look that up in Blackboard. Well, the professor hadn't made that grade average column visible in Blackboard. And a lot of professors aren't aware of what students are seeing on their end of things. And so sometimes asking that question and then helping students track that with that grading column can be really helpful. Reviewing graded quizzes, tests, and exams is a best practice, and going through and having conversations about, so why do you think you missed this question? Why did you answer that way? Or several people in the class answered B. Why is A the correct answer? And having the conversation so that they're learning from their mistakes can help them understand growth mindset. Providing suggestions for how to study for your content area. One of the workshops that the Success Center had that was really popular was how to study for math exams, because students were so used to plug and chug math in high school. Well, I just review the stuff, I take the test, I plug in the formulas or whatever, and then I move on. But in college, math builds, you're going to use it again and again. in different classes and across the curriculum. I tell them if stats is required for your degree, you're going to have to use stats in a project in some other class. So you need to retain that information, but they don't know how to study, especially for various content areas. So why can't make flashcards for math? What's the best way to study? And giving suggestions for that can be very helpful. I'm, of course, a big fan of tutoring. I used to refer to tutoring as a college hack. So your tutors have had your classes before. They've taken the exams you're getting ready to take. Wouldn't it be great to sit down with somebody that can help you understand how to better retain the information and how to better prepare for the exam? So it's not, tutoring is generally something good students do. It's not, I'm failing this class, I need to go to tutoring as a stigma. And then I love this one. And if you all have more questions about this, I highly recommend Judy Jenkins in the chemistry department. And I think she'll forgive me because she knows I recommend her a lot. She always put these great reflection questions at the end of her exams that would ask, and this is just some examples, but sometimes she would get way more detailed, but she would ask questions like, how long did you study for the exam? Making the student reflect more on what they did to prepare for the exam. And then what content area did you struggle with the most on the exam? Or how did you study? What tools did you use? Did you use flashcards? Did you make your own study guide? She would ask really specific questions to make students think about their study habits and then possibly make corrections in the future. And some of the like wraparound questions she asked would take a good 10 minutes for them to answer, but it was all part of that metacognition process. It's still me too.
Yep.
Yep.
So you.
I promise I'm going to let Starr talk. So I want to talk about emotional self-regulation, and this is what we're getting ready to spend a lot of time on, because students are shutting down. They're not going to class. They're trauma dumping. They're lacking emotional self-regulation. And Tim, Tim, I saw you unmute and I wasn't sure if you wanted to ask something. Look at me paying attention to Zoom. So we know that metacognition leads to more awareness about how we're learning, but it can also lead to a reflection of how a student is feeling and then what's triggering the emotion. And so when students are, and I know they do this, when they're telling you things like, I struggle with test anxiety, or I'm really worried about this test, or I hate working with this group, asking them, okay, well, what emotion are you feeling right now? Ask them to define it, and then ask them what's really causing the emotion. So when they get a low test score, and they're upset, and they're crying, or they're disappointed, or they think they're a failure, helping them to think through that emotional thought process, and then refocusing them on, well, first of all, let's put this in context. Does this one grade have that big an impact on your final grade? And typically, especially with first year students, it doesn't. It's one grade of many. If it's a first year class and there are 2 grades for the whole class and it does have a big impact, I suggest you reconsider that. But understanding how one grade only may slightly impact a final grade, it's not the end of the world. How does this grade fit in the right? Because a lot of our students don't see that their grades in high school, they got through magic. They didn't track them. And so now if they see, well, this grade is this percentage of your final grade and you got this, and it's a 60%, but you have these other grades, and really this might only impact your final grade by a couple of percentage points. And then helping them put that in perspective. Ask them what study practices worked or what didn't work. What did you do to prepare? And then how can we help you prepare for in a different way? Or how much they studied. I read over this a half hour before the exam, or I didn't read the material at all, which is very common. And And then something like not working well within a group, if they have any kind of social anxiety, help them vocalize what's not working well in the group. And then reflect on what is needed for the group to work well. And then what's the desired outcome of the group work? What are you trying to get out of it as a professor, as well as for the students? So help them see this is the goal. And as a group, we all need to define our roles in it. And then if they have a better understanding of that, and it's not just here, work as a group without any kind of understanding of what they're supposed to be doing, you're basically asking them to socialize in their minds. You're asking them to do this assignment, but in their minds, you're forcing me to socialize and I don't know these people and that freaks me out.
And one more thing, just to add on that, in all the student success seminars this fall, we wanted to start looking at ways to help students cope with stress, because we're seeing this a lot more. And so we created a couple of assignments, but every seminar class should be implementing them within their classes. And it has students looking at, this is something that stresses me. This is how it physically makes me feel. This is emotionally how it makes me feel. And then we even have them to identify how stressful it is on a 0 to 100. And almost all of the ones that I've looked at, the students are saying that every single one of them is like 80 to 90% of stress level. But then the second component of it is, okay, so this is what is stressful. What can you control? What can't you control? And then what can you do in the future to help you manage that stress? And so we're hoping that if we start in multiple ways, like if we're doing these in our seminar classes, and then you all are also doing these within your other classes, we'll start to help these students learn some of this self-regulation through the process.
5 stars. I love that idea. Those are conversations I have with students too. Well, why do you feel that way? Describe your emotions to me. So we're using this book, and again, 5 stars, highly recommend. This is a great book. It is published in 2023, like this year, and post-pandemic. There's so many great things with this. And I can't get enough of it right now. Right now I'm flipping through and reading different sections. At some point I need to just read it from cover to cover, but I'm a bunny trail kind of reader. You got to see me research, it's a mess. But this, there's a section of a whole chapter in this book called Promoting Emotional Resilience. And it recognizes 7 principles of emotional resilience. And I'm going to let Starr take this one because it's directed towards instructors.
Okay. So we went through, again, this book is fantastic. Like whenever I just opened it up for the first time and like flipped through, one of the very first like pages that I stopped on was talking about students or anybody and their stress, and how sometimes how it literally takes over a part of our brain. And so if we're going into a classroom and we've got all this worry, then our brains literally do not have the capacity to be able to learn. And so then that's where we started like digging in a little bit deeper. But the first of the 7 principles is develop your own growth mindset. And so this is from a professor's perspective. So if you go into your class and you already know that some of these students from the beginning are poor performers, and you just already just assume that the reason that they're not going to perform is because of their lack of ability, then most likely the students are going to feed off of that. But if you go in and have the belief that your student can learn, and then identify the gaps to determine how to fill them. I think I've heard before that there had been a professor in the past that would go in on the first day of class, would make students take a test, and based on the test, then they would say 60% of you are gonna fail this class. But I think that's the whole purpose of college, is for us to go into a class, a student to go into a class and not know the content, and then by the time that they leave the class, be able to pass that test. And so I feel like that is an example of very much fixed mindset, because we want our students to understand that they can learn and they have that capacity.
I would also add to this, and the book doesn't address this, but way back in the day when I was teaching K through 12, I was an English and history teacher, and I had to teach pre-algebra to 7th graders. Well, first of all, 7th graders, it's just the worst grade to teach. They're fun. They're very funny. but I had a principal once that said they just need to put on a farm during 7th grade to learn like good work ethic and then bring them back because their brains aren't going to retain things. And so pre-algebra, I'm not a math teacher. And so I went into this going, oh my God, this would be a nightmare. And it definitely was. Until I got help from a colleague that was an actual math teacher. There's reasons why I had to teach it for a semester anyway. I was an administrator. We had to fill a gap. It's fine. It turned out fine. But for a while I was struggling. And I really believed that I just couldn't teach math. And so this colleague of mine started writing my lesson plans for me and helping me through that. And that kind of growth mindset. Right now we have students in front of us that have a lot going on and walking in with the belief that, you know what, I'm a good instructor and I can grow and learn to teach this new, very unique group of students. And I mean, you all are on here right now looking at that. So clearly you've got a growth mindset. It's just maybe a little more emotionally draining right now than usual.
So the second one is teach the concepts of growth mindset and harnessing peer support. And so this is moving from the professor having their own growth mindset to actually teaching these concepts to our students. And so one of the quotes in the book said, your brain is like a muscle that grows stronger and smarter when we exercise it. And Dr. Vance talked about that, even a few minutes ago. But again, students are in class to learn. And so we need to help them understand, that they don't have to know how to do it all from the beginning, that yet concept again, and just helping them understand. And then that harnessing the peer support, part of the book talks about, that think, pair, share kind of thing, having other students talking about their experiences as well. So if a student is hearing that somebody else is struggling with the same thing, then the professor listens to that, takes a few more minutes and goes into it a little bit more in depth. But just, I think it goes back to one of those, Dr. Vance and I actually talked about it the other day. You get so anxious sometimes because you don't want to say something in front of your classmates because you might be judged. And so you hold back. But then whenever students are starting to realize that other students around them kind of feel the same way and that they can learn to grow together, I think that that's a really important aspect.
And when students are like, I don't understand, or starting with, I don't expect you to understand this. If you don't understand this, I get to do my job. That's why I'm here. And those are great moments where they realize, oh, okay, so it's okay that I'm relying on this person to help me learn.
Yep. Okay. So help students cope better with academic emotional triggers. This one right here, I love this one. This is probably my favorite one. But it talks about self-regulation comes into play for learners at 3 different junctures. So at first, before performing the task. So the example that they gave in the book was, I think, writing an essay. And so before even performing the task, the student might just already be in a complete panic over what they're even supposed to do, how to even get started on it while performing the task. So maybe you're working on something, you have writer's block, and then you just have a complete meltdown over that. And then the last one is when the students get the results. And this is especially important if the results are not what the student expected. So they tried really hard on this essay, they did all the things, but then they get it back and they got a poor grade on it. So some of the suggestions that they gave is give students a choice in tasks, methods, or study partners as often as you can. And so students learn different ways. It also depends on the subject. And so I think sometimes if you are giving a test or you're doing something and it's just not clicking with the class, then sometimes you might need to change your method of how you teach it. I think we've seen that so much in the last couple of years because our students have just changed so much. I know that some of the things that I did 5 years ago, I'm doing them completely different now. And so I think we also need to be open to changing some of those, but then also giving the students the opportunity to identify how they work best and how they study best. Give students the opportunity to assess their own work and learn from their mistakes. So like Dr. Vance said earlier, like giving them some feedback. I think it's a great opportunity I know people sometimes don't like it anymore where you do the peer reviews, but it is challenging sometimes for students, but it's really good. It does put them out of their comfort zones. But I think you also try harder whenever you think that your peer is going to look at it. So I think that's a great one. And then pay attention to students' beliefs about their own learning abilities and respond with encouragement and support when necessary. We're going to talk a little bit about a survey, but they sent out a survey around fourth week, and it asked for feedback from students, like where they were in the semester. And some of the feedback that they actually got was that students wanted words of encouragement and not just words of when they're doing bad. And so, but the only time they get any of this communication is whenever they've done bad or they've missed, but it's never like they're doing really great. They do really good on a paper or an exam and they don't get any acknowledgement from it. So.
Praise intentionally. And so Starr was just talking about the students want positive feedback too. I mean, who doesn't? It drives me crazy when people are like, well, you know, your positive feedback is that you get a paycheck. No, I need people to tell me I do a good job sometimes. I like that. And I do that with students. I told a student yesterday how proud I was of him, and I thought he was going to cry. Because I don't know that anybody told him that yet. And, you know, he's just a freshman, and okay, maybe people think, well, it's just midterm, so is it too soon? No, it meant a lot to him to hear how proud I was of him and the progress that he'd made. But there's praising ability versus effort, and both are important. But when we only praise ability, like you're so smart, it can push students into imposter syndrome or tap into imposter syndrome, where they're worried about, well, sooner or later, people are going to find out that I've been faking it the whole time. I mean, I was in the doctoral program here and was taking the quantitative or the qual's good, quant. I'd had qual before. I don't mean qual's good, quant's bad. But I was in a quantitative research class and I had very, very little experience with it. And I was like, this is it. This is where they're going to find out I'm a fraud. And I mean, I was in my 40s. Surely somebody would have found out I was a fraud before then, right? So those moments of praising ability, it can throw students off a little bit. I think it's still important that we tell students when they're bright and creative. Yes, that's important. But when we're also praising effort, though, look at how many drafts of this paper and look at how far you've come and how hard you've worked. And praising that too is important. You have to set that up though with mental health and life circumstances, because some of my students, 100% for them, 100% effort from them looks a lot different from 100% effort from one of my other students that may be struggling with mental health, have family problems. Their 100% might be showing up. And that may not be reaching the course outcomes, but if you're only focusing then on the effort, that can backfire too. So finding that nice balance and what works with the students. And then I liked this quote as well, because if we're sending this message that that our mental health is just part of something that we can outgrow, or our ability to regulate our emotions, like, well, you know, I know you feel anxious, but you need to get that under control. We're telling students that they must not be trying hard enough. And I don't know about you, but I've never been able to out-try my anxiety or my ADHD. And so recognizing that that some students, their efforts are valid and maybe hampered a little bit by, or a lot by, their mental health, and that's legitimate.
All right, so help students reframe challenges. So this one is help students like re-image and reframe whatever is triggering their emotional experience, and react instead to a new interpretation. So again, that's kind of what we're trying to do in our seminar classes, is because we're trying to get them to understand like what made you get to here. But some of the other questions I think is, what did you learn from this? So if you failed an exam, what did you learn? Well, I learned that I didn't study hard enough, or I learned that I studied the wrong way, or I learned that maybe I need to do something a little bit differently. And then again, what could I have done differently? So I think those two, kind of go together. But helping students understand that I love teachable moments. That's like one of my favorite phrases right now. Like, we're going to take this as a teachable moment. Now let's talk about why this happened and what can we do differently for the next time. And then also just letting them know that not all stress is bad stress, because sometimes we do need that stress to keep us motivated. But students really are having this hard time that if they fail an exam, then they think that they failed everything. And so then they're just doing the total avoidance and they are just disappearing completely. And then by the time that we get a hold of them and try to get them back, then they're behind in like 5 classes. And then that's making their anxiety go up higher. And so just trying to help them identify early how they can see what's happening and change some of their actions to help them. And sometimes I think we get so frustrated at our students because we're like, why do you not know how to do this? I don't think it's their fault. I think so much stuff that's happened with the pandemic, like they didn't have the opportunity to learn some of this stuff. They didn't have to do some of it because in high school, if they didn't get their papers done or whatever, there was not any deadlines, or they had everything was due December the 15th. It didn't matter whenever they turned it in. It could have been from the first week of class. And so now there's these new types of guidelines and these new types of deadlines and all these things that they are learning by themselves for the first time. And they don't necessarily know how to compartmentalize and how to process and how to do it. And so I think we've had to take a step back, especially with first year courses and seminars, and to try to now help them learn some of these executive functioning skills.
And I think it's important to note too, that the messaging that they've probably been getting in high school, and I bet you could ask any of your classes this question: how many of you had teachers in high school that told you your college professors wouldn't care about you? And they're all going to raise their hands, or mostly all going to raise their hands, because that is a common message. And I'd be willing to bet a lot of money that they were also told over the past 4 years, you're not going to be ready for college. The rate you're going, you're not going to be ready for college. A lot of our students at EKU have been told they're not college material and have been advised by counselors not to go to college. The first opportunity that they see that validates those messages from high school can cause a shutdown for, I think, very good reason. They're either going to look for that validation, they might ignore it, but they also might let it fuel them. I'm going to prove all those people wrong, but that's rare. And so sometimes that validation comes across in a really negative way. And so helping them to understand that's not true. Nope, this one's still you.
Okay. Match high expectations and concern with high support. So I think it's really important to make sure that you're kind of listening to your students and I understand if you're teaching 5 classes and you have multiple, you have 200 students that are in your class, and sometimes that's hard. But, if a student does come and speak with you, try to make sure that you do kind of get to know them a little bit. I always, whenever I take attendance, like especially like the first week, whenever they tell me, I'm like, tell us a little bit about yourself. I write down like where they're from and if they had an animal or something like that. And so then that way, before I have a meeting or something with them, I can always go back and look at that. And those get to know you discussion boards are also really great for those types of things. But if a student knows that you like really do care about them, they're going to want to try harder for you. And so I think, again, just trying to make sure that you are sensitive to the things that are going on. And some of the things that are going on in their lives are hard. Like some of them have some real legit things at home, personally, mentally, you know, all these things. And so just being aware and acknowledging those things, I think, is important. But there's this fine balance right now too of how do we hold these high expectations and hold students accountable and then still be sensitive to the mental health component of it. And so I think that's where a lot of this research is really coming from right now, is because everybody is trying to figure this out. If somebody can solve it, then they're going to make a whole lot of money. But I think we have to try to still set those high expectations. We do need to try to hold them accountable, and then they're going to respect you more. If you've ever had a class and they're like, oh, I just want to take this class because it's super easy, or you've had a class that has challenged you, I always enjoyed the classes that challenged me more, because it wasn't like just a waste, you know, like I actually got challenged to be better. And I think students won't articulate that that's what they want, but they really do. And then support is absolutely crucial. Communicate on how students are doing, tell them what they can do to do better, get them the resources, tell them about the Student Success Center, the Knoll Studio, the Center for STEM Excellence, all of these other things that are available on campus, and show them that you see their effort. And now let's get you in these places and teach you the strategies that's going to help you to be successful.
And I want to make it clear that while I do view faculty as a critical resource to students, you don't have to have all the answers. And students appreciate when faculty say, you know what, I'm not sure, but I know somebody who will know the answer to this. Let me connect you to Lara, Vance, Starr, Wentzel, the Student Success Center. Reach out to somebody at FCT&L and we'll find the answers. That's modeling to students also that it's okay to ask for help. My professor is asking for help, and that kind of modeling is important. I don't want faculty to ever think that we believe they should be having these big, long mental health conversations with students. It's not always appropriate. We're not all equipped to do that, nor should we be. But just the listening and the saying, you know what, I'm not sure, but I care enough about you to get you to the right person. And that will resonate with them. And then destigmatizing asking for help. So I just kind of addressed that. But I tell students that the secret of adulthood is that we all have to have help. And that for some reason, we grow up, we're raised with this belief that when we're an adult, we should have it all figured out and that we don't ask for help. And adults just, I don't know, is there some magic moment you turn 18 and suddenly you understand all of the things? Now, are there 18-year-olds that think that they do know all of the things? Absolutely. But there's not a magic moment. I don't think we ever arrive to a point in our life where we don't need help. I tell students, I need so much help, I have to hire people. When I worked at the Success Center, I would say, I had to hire 30 students to help me. That's how much help I need. And so making that very clear that asking for help is a thing that adults do. Fortunately, this generation, the stigma on mental health isn't as bad, though I still do meet with students that say things like, well, my parents don't believe in mental health. Or just yesterday, a student told me, my mom doesn't believe anxiety is real. And I'm like, oh, I feel anxious just hearing that. So I feel invalidated. They think that tutoring means that you're not smart enough to do this, that maybe I don't belong in college if I need a tutor. Nope, tutoring's a college hack. We've already talked about that. Or counseling, if I need somebody to help me with my feelings, I must be weak. I have had male students tell me I'm a man, I don't need counseling on more than one occasion, which I find alarming. But no, asking for help is a sign of wisdom. We do a lot of walking students to resources. If a faculty member walks a student to the counseling center, it's on the 5th floor of the Whitlock building, the counseling center will view it as a crisis appointment without you even needing to say that. You can, though, if you want to make it clear, you can say to the person at the front desk at the counseling center, the student does need to be seen right away, and they'll get them in. Or if you're just helping them to schedule an initial appointment, that's fine too. For not just students, but for faculty as well, I have the student wellness website and the QR code is on here. We developed this as a one place to land for students for any kind of wellness resources. So physical health, food and nutrition, mental health. There's a tile for student parents. Right, the other side of it is still in Drupal, so it's not real pretty yet, but the content's there and we're constantly developing it. So even as you go through it, if you think that there's something else that could be added to it, let me know. It might not get fixed immediately because right now I don't even have 15 minutes between meetings. But that's okay. I'll get to this. This is one of my passion projects right now, and it's a lot of fun actually keeping updated. But this is also for faculty to go to as well to see, okay, this student asked me this question. Let me see if I can find a link. And then you can go in here or just send the link to them and say, here, look at this. There's all kinds of stuff on here to help you. And like I said, it's evolving, but it's been a lot of fun to watch it all come together.
Okay, so I wanted to touch base on midterm recovery because, as you know, midterm grades came out this week. So midterm recovery is specific for new first-time freshmen and new first-time transfers for less than 24 hours. So for a student to be caught on midterm recovery, they have to have gotten less than a 1.0 for their midterm GPA, and then they have to participate in a midterm recovery program. Students who are already declared a major, that they weren't admitted as Associate of General Studies or the AGS population, they will be changed out of their college majors into AGS. And then students must attend this workshop, and it's all housed through the Office of Advising and Career Services. So students will start getting this communication starting tomorrow. And then they have, I think, until the 16th to complete one of the workshops. And then they have to go attend a workshop, and they go through and they meet with an advisor and they go through and talk to them. Okay, like this is where you're at. This is what's happening. And then all of these students that attend this workshop will start sending out emails to all of their professors. These are very scripted. It says like, Dr. Vance, I have an F in your class. Can we meet so we can discuss if I can pass this class? These are not sent for you to absolutely, yes, you can pass this class. In some circumstances, that might not be the case, but they are sent for you to, if you can work with a student and the student is willing to commit and to finish the semester strong, try to work with them. If a student does not attend midterm recovery and they are on this midterm recovery process, then they will be removed from the university following the midterm recovery process. They are notified in multiple ways through housing, knocking on doors, calling, everything. But there's roughly, I think, 230 students from the freshman class that have fallen under this. So I just wanted to tell you this so you kind of have an idea, because I would expect, especially if you teach any gen eds or classes that new first-time freshmen are taking, you might receive some emails similar to this. And then the other thing I wanted to touch base on is some student surveys. So I touched base on the 4th week check-in survey before. We had over 1,000 students that answered this, and they actually answered it pretty correctly. It was, how do you feel like you're doing? How many classes have you missed? What do you expect your progress report to look like? And most of them were pretty spot on because they went back and compared what did their answers to that look like compared to what their actual midterm grades were, or actually to their progress report grade. So we are using some of that data, and there are a couple of other surveys that are going out to students. Another one that's out right now is a tech survey, and we're trying to figure out what technology students are using. And so if you hear a student talk about that, please encourage them to complete that. That's through institutional research. And then you should have gotten an email yesterday from Dr. John Bose. We're doing the EKU ought to know. And so this is actually a faculty survey, and we want to know what's working, also what's not working. Because if you have a class and your students are coming to class and they're doing the work and they're doing all the things, we want to know what your secret sauce is. Like, tell us what you are doing that is working. And so we can try to copy and channel some of that to do it for some of our other classes. But then we also want to know what some of your, are you seeing the challenges that other people are kind of saying? Is it the attendance? Is it the submitting assignments? So if you can, please go through and complete that survey. It's super quick. And again, it came out from Dr. Bose yesterday. So
I haven't seen it. I want to see it. I want to see what the mental health questions are. Because we're doing we're looking at mental health on campus. We have a great counseling center, great psychology clinic, student health services. They all work together so well. I've been so encouraged this semester. But I'm really interested in what kind of support that we can put beyond that to help our students, but help our faculty, help our students too.
And to clarify, there's not specific questions for it. It literally is like
open-ended.
It's like 3 questions. Cool. It is 3 questions. It is what is working, what is not, and are these challenges. You go through and select which ones are all that apply, or put an other and add it in there. And then what we hope to do is, it's not just about retaining our students this semester. It's about what we need to put in place to retain our students in the future too. So we want to know what is working. How can we make more TLI sessions? How can we get some of these resources? What are students saying that they're struggling with, and how can we get them to where they need to be? So we keep asking students left and right, but we also want to know from our faculty as well.
Do you know how long the survey is open?
I don't.
It didn't say in the email. Because I was thinking about maybe running it in the Bigville newsletter.
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay.
Go for it. I don't think it will close anytime soon. And Dr. Shoe's over it, so.
No. All right. So I want to close this out with the referral process. Just so you know, if you have a student with a need, where do you send them? What do you do? How can you refer them? And you could send a link to the wellness website. There are going to be things beyond that. If there are behavioral issues with a student that border on, or not even border, like go into classroom disruption, and things like that, you can put in a student conduct referral form. If it fits the scope of the code of conduct, and this page will lead you can look up the student code of conduct and everything. But there's a referral form on here that if you want to report any kind of classroom behavioral issues that are violations of the code of conduct. Academic referrals, attendance, the student needs tutoring, the student isn't studying well for exams, you can fill out the student support referral form. It's on the Success Center website. It's there in the left column, but I think there's also, I'm sure there's something in a tile on my EKU where you can fill out the student support referral form as well. And that goes to Dr. Sweat at the Student Success Center, and she does outreach. I can't even imagine what that number is right now, because I even fill these out for students. Because it's not a say it thing, but they need academic help, and then Dr. Sweat reaches out. Mental health or other things. So please go to the student assistance and intervention team. This the web address looks different. You all are probably noticing this now, as different web pages are moving into WordPress versus Drupal. So if it's a www.studentconduct.eku.edu, it's in Drupal and it hasn't been migrated to WordPress. The Say It page has been migrated to WordPress, so it looks nice and sleek. And I have editing power over it now, but I haven't touched it because I haven't had time and I'm afraid. Even though I love updating websites, I find it so fun. But I haven't done it yet because I'm afraid I'll break something. Sorry, ADHD, that's okay. But any kind of mental health, so the Say It referral goes straight to it, depending on what you choose. If you choose threatening behavior, it goes to like the whole team, which is about, I should know this number, I'm the chair, 14 people right now, something like that. But if you choose like wellness or something like that, it goes to the core team. Those members are listed on the website. And then we determine outreach from there. The Say It meets weekly. But I get these in real time. I actually keep my email alerts on at night too. And so most of the time it wakes me up in the middle of the night, except the EKU Today email is still coming at 2 a.m. And so I'm starting to sleep through them a little bit sometimes. If it's an emergency and it's the middle of the night, please call EKU, please. But we check these in real time, and there are 3 of us that check them the second they come in. And the rest of the team checks them, of course. But there are 3 of us that check them in real time when they come in, just to make sure that we don't need to do anything immediate. But if there is an emergency, if a student is expressing suicidal ideation, or engaging in self-harm, please call EKU police so that they can do a welfare check on the student. All right, that's where we are. Any questions? Questions from the Zoom gallery? Questions from the room?
Answer your question about the mental health, it is on there as on that survey. It
Okay,
is one of the options.
awesome. Well, if you all need anything, we should have put our email addresses on here. lara.vance@eku.edu.
If you just put EKU Starr, STARR, I'm the only Starr, so I'm kind of easy to find. You can just Google it.
Yeah,
We will also be following up because there were 1 or 2 that were registered that weren't able to come, and we'll send the slides out. If that's okay.
Yeah.
And I'll have your all's contact information.
Yeah. Great. And we want to do more with this book too. So there could be more in the future, because I can't get enough of this book. Well, thank you all for being here. I appreciate your time and energy and your dedication to students. Monica, I look forward to that resource from you. Thank you.
What was your name? Alexa
Bowling.
Bowling?
Bowling.
Bowling.
BLLY.
Okay, I didn't have you on my list, so I wanted to make sure.
No, I grabbed her this morning and I
okay.
said, oh, I wasn't on
it.
it. Come with me.
She's
She's,
are you one of the graduate students?
Mhm.
Okay, she came to your last.
She did,
I
yeah.
knew she looked familiar, so
Yeah.
that's awesome. Thank you all for doing this.
oh, I'm happy to.
So I was looking at the attendance and, let me make sure that, oh, you got it. Tony.
Yeah, she's.
This session was scheduled first,
Mhm.
like I scheduled this session. And then the generative AI work group created one for